Hey guys, Michael here. Hope everything's going well in your world and you're ready for the next lesson. This is our exciting topic of Chapter 3. It's a beautiful day here. You can see behind me the sun is shining here in Boone. For those of you that are here in Boone, it's a great day to be studying strategic management. And I hope that you're ready for this. Okay then, let's tear right into this exciting topic. First, a little bit of a review. Last time, remember we climbed the golden stairway to strategic competitiveness. We started all the way down here talking just about plain resources. Just the plain old everyday vanilla land, labor, and capital. Of course, resources are necessary, but if you have resources, will you have strategic competitiveness? There's no guarantee. Maybe. You have to go through these other steps first, right? You have to combine those in such a way that you have capabilities. You have to develop core competencies. And remember, we have a special definition about core competencies, and I'm going to remind you of here in just a moment. Once you know your core competence, you may want to do value chain analysis so that you can hone in and zero in on your core competence. Hopefully, if everything goes well, you'll be able to get a competitive advantage and be able to achieve that holy grail of strategic competitiveness. Those 4 criteria, remember I said you're going to have to know these. V-R-I-S. V-R-I-S. VRIS. Yeah, VRIS. The VRIS model. A core competency is a capability that's valuable. It has to have marketability. It's rare. It has to be possessed by few, if any, other companies. It has to be costly to imitate. Yeah, other people can't copy it. And then finally, it has to be non-substitutable. That means that you can't find something else, a different resource that would do the same thing. So those are the 4 criteria that I'm going to ask you to know by heart. And last time we did this little exercise where we talked about finding the core competencies. Because if we think about companies that have survived for a long time, and we think about companies that have a sustainable competitive advantage, that have had an above normal profit for some time, obviously they must have some sort of core competence, unless they're a monopoly type of company that's somehow protected from competition, right? That's what the economists, the IO people would have us believe. But for a company like Canon, remember we said that Canon, we all know Canon. You may have had at one time or another Canon product. Canon digital cameras are not as popular as they used to be because of smartphones. Yeah, more pictures are taken with the smartphone every day than any other camera in the entire world. Smartphones almost completely killed the digital camera market, but cameras used to be a big deal. And some of us, if we like to take pictures, me included, I happen to like Sony, but Canon, still around. They still make copiers. They still make printers. They still make cameras. They make scanners. They make a lot of medical imaging equipment. So what is it about this company that links all of these things together? Yeah, it's technology. Specifically, it's optical technology. I think we could say that Canon is more of an optical digital technology company than anything else. So being in these different industries, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So they can do some basic research in this optical digital technology. If they come up with some breakthrough or even some refinement in the existing technology, they can use that in copiers and printers and so forth and so on. Let's look at another example. What about P&G? Procter & Gamble. Yeah, what about Procter & Gamble? Procter & Gamble, they make soap. They make diapers. They make toothpaste. They make shampoo. They make deodorant. What's the glue here? What's the core competence of P&G? It's not technology, right? For example, I hope that the technology for making diapers like Pampers and toothpaste like Crest, I hope that that's not the same technology. Yeah. So these are really kind of ordinary everyday products. They're things that, at least the chemical composition and making these products, while there might be variations in quality, it's not a big barrier to break through, not like optical digital technology, right? And so, what is it about P&G? Yeah, you're right. P&G is kind of a marketing company. If you've taken a marketing MBA class, or if you ever will take a marketing MBA class, or even one of your undergraduate classes that uses cases, chances are you might have used one of their many brands. They're very good at developing these brands and then making them almost household words, and then getting this distribution network. And so their core competency is really in that. And actually, I heard that P&G is actually kind of having some difficulty these days because brand names are not carrying the same weight that they used to carry. Yeah, there's so many private labels now, like the Great Value at Walmart, or some of the others, that this is really kind of cutting into them. People are not paying as much attention, at least in their toiletries, of the brand name that they used to. But anyway, let's look at another example. 3M, one of my favorite companies. Keep coming back to this one, right? Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. They've got some big products out there. Sandpaper, Scotch tape, Post-it notes, adhesive medical tape, reflective signs, Thinsulate. They make these different components. What's the core competence that ties these things all together? It's kind of a technology in a way. It's kind of a technology in that they tend to focus on certain types of things, like adhesives. They want to be the leader in adhesives. If something is going to use some sort of adhesive, that is the sticky stuff, they want to be in there and develop a brand name product with that. What about Amazon.com? Is there anybody in here that doesn't use Amazon.com on nearly a daily basis? Amazon.com, they don't really produce anything on themselves, by themselves, but they do sell just about everything, right? Books, clothes, tools, electronics, toys, food, etc. What's the primary core competence? Is it marketing? Yeah, maybe. They definitely have economies of scale. We know what economies of scale are. Is it their production technology? No. Is it somehow they have cutting edge technology? Well, not really. They do. They're in the cloud and the way that they use their e-commerce sites and so forth. They are definitely a leader, but it's really as much about economies of scale as it is about cutting edge technology. They probably do lead in some software. What else? What about logistics? I think Amazon.com in some ways has kind of become a logistics company. First off, they're kind of first mover. Everyone trusts them. They practically force you to become an Amazon Prime member. It's very hard not to become an Amazon Prime member. And then, man, they're able to just deliver stuff right away. Let me show you something. I'll be right back. This is my latest Amazon.com purchase. The Amazon.com Basics. And this is just tablets. I needed some tablets. And, I wanted to go down to Staples. I like to go down to Staples, but I just couldn't do it. And I was kind of in a hurry, and so I'm just going to order it out off of Amazon.com. I ordered these off of Amazon.com, and bam! bam, they were here the next day. Yeah. So there you go. I'm set for my tablets. There are very few companies that have that type of capability and the economies of scale and the acceptance and the first mover advantage, so that Amazon.com is one of the FANG companies. You know the FANG companies. Yeah, it sounds kind of scary, right? FANGs. But no, FANG stands for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and there are a couple of others that kind of fit into that category as well. Like 6 or 7 companies that are leading the S&P 500, that if it wasn't for these 5 or 6 companies, and Amazon is one of them, they seem to be on a roll right now. It seems like they can do almost no wrong. And just lots of things. We'll talk about Amazon.com some more throughout the course. Right, and so then we talked about this idea of dynamic capabilities. Hope you watched that video. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the difficulty of imitations. Some of the others are pretty easy to understand. Remember the 4 characteristics of a core competence. It has to be valuable. That's pretty easy to understand, right? Has to be rare. That's pretty easy to understand. Either there's a lot of it or there's not a lot of it. This doesn't take a lot of explanation. Without substitutes. That's pretty easy to understand too. But imitability. Yeah, that makes it a little bit more difficult. That's a little bit harder. It takes a little bit more explanation. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about this idea of what makes something difficult to imitate or costly to imitate. Difficult, costly. We could use those terms interchangeably because the way in this class they kind of, they're the same thing. If something is difficult, that means it's costly. So, no, we're going to discuss it this time. That's still from the last time. So, what makes something costly to imitate? Well, one thing might be unique historical conditions. Yeah. We know that first mover advantage, you might have heard of that term before, first mover advantage. In strategic management, it's believed that if you are the first mover in something and you gain a reputation in something before anyone else has a chance to enter that market, you're the first mover, that might give you an advantage. And so there are examples of some companies, for example, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is Atlanta-based company. How many people here have been to the Coke Museum in Atlanta? Yeah, it's pretty cool, isn't it? So, but if you think about it, Coke as a product, it is pretty low tech. Soft drinks in general are pretty low tech this day and age. Some flavorings, usually some chemicals, some sweetener, some carbonation. Right? It doesn't take a lot to enter that market. If you and I wanted to make a soft drink, I bet we could have a soft drink probably by tomorrow. Get on the internet and figure out how to make one and make it. So why is it that if this product is so easy to make, it's so common, why is it that Coca-Cola seems to dominate this particular industry? Well, one of the things that people point to is these unique historical conditions. That is, Coca-Cola came about in the late 1800s. It was just by chance that the druggist, the chemist, happened to be in his drugstore, and he happened to put these things together, and they had just created carbonation. And then later, it wasn't after he started getting things rolling, you had some other people that were trying to imitate him and so forth. But mass marketing just came about at that same time. And then also mass distribution. So the person that invented Coca-Cola began spreading it all around the world through these mass techniques. It was just by chance, serendipity, that Coca-Cola happened to be the first mover advantage. And then they built this organization with distribution networks, brand name capital. All of these things become part of their core competence, so that Coca-Cola is one of the most valuable brands for consumer products in the world. and it's not that nobody could ever produce anything so wonderful as Coca-Cola, but they've got this whole system in place now. They've got this distribution network. They've got name recognition. First mover advantage. They've kind of become an icon. So, number one is historical conditions. Another example. All right. How many people are anime fans? All right. Mickey Mouse. Okay, he's the guy, right? Mickey Mouse, is he the most awesome cartoon ever? No, he's not. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you're a Mickey fan, I don't want to insult you, but he's pretty lame in a lot of ways. What I mean is that if you try to introduce a Mickey Mouse type of character these days, you would probably get laughed off of the stage. Because anime, computer animation, everything has progressed so much further and so much farther along that he's just, he's very passé. And again, I love Mickey. Don't be thinking I'm a Mickey hater. I'm not. I love Mickey. He's an icon and all. But I'm just saying that he's kind of lucky in that he was the first cartoon that ever moved. Yeah. So he has first mover advantage. Yeah, that's a pun. Yeah, as being the first cartoon to ever move, he has first mover advantage, meaning that, Walt Disney happened to be an artist and a cartoonist at the same time that motion pictures came out. And so he was able to tap into this new technology. He also built an empire around that. So now the Disney organization has built an empire around their characters. But it all started with Mickey Mouse. And so Mickey Mouse is one of, if not the most valuable cartoon of all times. I'd have to double check that. He used to be. I think he's becoming a little bit less popular than he used to be. But, right, yeah, I know him. He's one of the most pirated images in the world. And he's pirated around China quite often as well. And it's just because of first mover advantage. Happened to be the first one to do it, particular time and place, and because of unique historical conditions. Remember, we're asking the questions, what makes these core competencies costly to imitate? Another one is something we're just going to call causal ambiguity. What does causal ambiguity mean? Let's break it down. Ambiguous. You just can't really tell, right? If something is ambiguous, it means that we don't really understand it. Cause? Yeah, it just means causal. If it's a causal relationship, this causes this. So anyway, causal ambiguity, we break it down, it simply means we don't know. Yeah, it's kind of a cop-out. I don't like this one, but it's true. Sometimes we look at a company and say, how in the world are they making so much money for so long? How are they doing that? It's causal ambiguity. Causal ambiguity is a good thing. Even a lot of companies can't tell you why it is that they're successful. Teams get together, something works, it clicks, there's a chemistry, all of the mysteries that make life interesting, that fits into that causal ambiguity. Social complexity. Social complexity, chemistry, culture. All right, here's a question. Have you guys ever gone out on a date with someone and then it's a blind date? Let's suppose your friend sets you up, or you have a relative that sets you up, and you go out with this person, and then somebody asks you, how was it? And you're like, it was okay. There's no chemistry. Or then there might be another time where you go out on a date, and you say, how was it? Oh man, it was great. We just sat up and talked for hours, blah, 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 right? Why? Who knows, right? That's one of those things that makes life interesting. That little thing called chemistry, social complexity. Sometimes when people get together, either in pairs on a date or in a group of people, in a team of people working together. Sometimes it clicks and sometimes it flops. Why? Hey, you tell me, right? We don't know. But we know it's out there. We know that social complexity exists. And we know that organizations that develop an amazing culture and this complex culture of innovation or whatever, and they get everybody on board and everybody's drinking the Kool-Aid and everybody's pushing and feels like they're in this system, man, if you could get that, you can understand why that would be a core competence and why that would lead to competitive advantage. On the other hand, as you go into the workplace, as I have, you're going to find that some organizations, everything they touch, it's just toxic. The environment might be toxic and people intentionally try not to get along. This can be just as much an anti-core competence as can be, a positive core competence leading to competitive advantage. So social complexity is another one. Yeah, the example, some basketball teams play together very well. Here I am. Some basketball teams play very well, even though there are no talented superstars. Yeah, the Cinderella team. They don't have any really big thing. And in March Madness, we've always got one Cinderella team. Who are these guys? There's no one on that team. Or who are these gals? There's no one on that team that's really, a superstar. But somehow they seem to be pulling it off. You break them up. They might not have any top picks for the pros, no real identifiable talent, but somehow when they're working together, it just path dependence. What does that mean? Well, let's break it down. Dependence means, it depends. Path, we know what that means. So what does this mean? We put this together, path dependence. It means that, where I am, where I can go next depends on where I am now. So that means that where I go depends on my path. So I'm walking. I want to step here. Well, I can't if I'm here. But if I happen to be moving in that direction, bam, then it's good to go, right? So why is it that Apple came to dominate the smartphone industry? Why didn't somebody else dominate the smartphone industry? I mean, mobile phones were around, cell phones were around, lots of other companies were around, but nobody had everything in place the way that Apple did, right? And so they had the easy UGI, they had the miniaturization, they had the computer technology, they had the software. So even though Nokia and others were in the phone business, Apple came along and just bam, took over and created this device that's completely changed our worlds. And you could say, well, nobody else could have done it. It would have been hard for anybody else to do it. They've had some people that try to come up and imitate them. Closest, I guess, would be Samsung. But so path dependence means where we can go today depends on where we were yesterday. It would be hard for me to run for president right now and have a chance of getting there. If we were even like political careers, usually the people that end up running and actually winning are usually career politicians. President Trump is an exception to that rule. But so path dependence is in lots of things. It's hard to become a doctor overnight. It depends on, you have to have training, you have to have everything in place, you have to move. So path dependence is a part of this core competence explanation of why something might be difficult to imitate. All right. Does anybody have any questions? I'm kind of in the way over here. Where can I put me? I'm going to just pull myself off the screen for the moment. I'll put myself back here in just a moment. So, right, what we have here, these are our 4 conditions. Our V, R, I, S. Have something that's valuable, rare, costly to imitate, and non-substitutable. And then we got 4 different states, depending on whether we're meeting some or none of these or all of these conditions. Well, if you've got something, you've got this capability that's not valuable, it's not rare, it's not costly, it's not substitutable, man, you are in some pretty sorry shape. Yeah, because if you don't even have something that's valuable, then it's competitive disadvantage, right? Below average returns. If we have something that's valuable, but it's not rare, it's not costly to imitate, substitutability really doesn't matter. If these two are not met, it doesn't really matter if we can find substitutes or not. What situation is that? Well, we're calling that competitive parity. That means we're just making average returns. And there's nothing wrong with this. This is where most companies are. Most companies, by average, are making just average returns. Many companies are well-run little organizations. They run a tight ship, but they don't really have something that's rare or costly, imitated or non-substitutable. They're just average companies. Let's suppose we have something that's valuable, rare, but it's not costly to imitate, maybe substitutable. Well, if it's valuable, then they should be able to have a competitive advantage, right? But if it's not costly to imitate, then it's going to be temporary. I guess one rule of strategic management is if something can be imitated, it will be imitated. This last situation, ding, 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 ding. We got a 4-star industry. We're meeting all these criteria. This is the one that has the sustainable competitive advantage. Now, you spend some time thinking about Brenda and Chuck, thinking about coming up with that product, the sunscreen on the towelette. Which situation do you think that one was? Situation 1, 2, 3, or 4? Was the idea valuable? Yeah, sure it was. I mean, I've used this case before, and usually the reaction is, oh man, that's kind of a neat little product. Was it rare? Well, actually, at the time they came up with it, nobody else had thought of this idea. So yeah, it was kind of rare. Was it costly to imitate? No, it was very easy to imitate. So, yeah, in our discussion that we had on Zoom, we said, well, they might have been able to have a temporary competitive advantage, but it probably wouldn't have lasted forever because the product was not difficult to imitate. Okay, then. Next slide. I'll pull my... Hey, it's me again. Yeah. So, next thing we're going to talk about is outsourcing. You guys have probably heard of outsourcing before. You've probably studied it in some of your other courses, probably especially maybe your supply chain courses, maybe with Dr. Charlie Chen. Yeah. Outsourcing, as it says here, we kind of know what it is. Outsourcing is the purchase of some or all of your value-creating activity from an external supplier. Usually this is because the specialty supplier can provide these functions more efficiently. I'm going to introduce this idea. I'm going to call this a value chain. You might have heard of the term value chain before. This was produced by Michael Porter many years ago, and Michael Porter is talking about this idea of a chain of activities. He breaks them up into primary activities. If we think of a marketing company, a manufacturing company, if we think of a manufacturing company like a company that's manufacturing computers, for example, like Dell, well, you've got that. We think of manufacturing as the main operations, this block right here, but we also have a group of people and resources that are in charge of inbound logistics, inventory management, supply chain management, outbound logistics. We also have to do some marketing and sales. We also have to do some service, right? These are primary activities in that they contribute directly to the production of the product. But we can also think about these other activities that have to be done even though they're not contributing directly to the product. And this includes things like making sure that we have a place, making sure we have the infrastructure, we have the computer systems and all the other resources. HR. We probably have some people in here that are concentrating in HR. I know my teaching assistant. Shout out to Nick if he's watching. Nick Claggett, I think is how you pronounce his name. He's an HRM concentration guy in the MBA program. Yeah, we also have technological development. Most companies have to have some innovation. And then we have procurement. So these are the secondary activities. Now, we can think of these as something that's taking place, but we can also think of these as costs. We can also think that, hey, we got to get this done somehow, right? We got to get the inbound logistics. It's going to cost us money. Now, we can either do that in-house, or we can let someone else do it. In our manufacturing, too. Remember, we're talking about our examples of manufacturing company. Even our marketing and sales. Do we want to do our marketing and sales in-house, or do we want to go to a marketing firm? It used to be Madison Avenue. I guess Madison Avenue still has some marketing and advertising firms. If you ever watched the series Mad Men, if you haven't watched that, I recommend it. It's really cool. It's a rip-roaring story, but it shows you historically how the advertising business has evolved in the old days, Madison Avenue. So we might get a firm to take care of the marketing and sales, the service part too. And just like these things too. More and more, for those of you that are HR majors, I happen to know that HR as a function, many of the more mundane parts of HR are being outsourced. So if you're thinking about a career in human resource management, you really want to specialize. Either that, or you will go to a company that is one of the providers, one of the vendors for outsourcing. Yeah, so this is just showing that graphically how that might work. Let me give you since we're talking about manufacturing, we're talking about computers. Let's keep talking about Dell versus Apple. Many of you have the MacBooks, right? I know those have become popular. Probably one of the next, if not the next, I don't know, it's HP, Dell, Lenovo are kind of leading up the Windows-based machines now. It seems like they keep trading places as the first mover or the number one provider. But let's talk about Dell. What kind of a company is Dell? What's Dell's core competence? Are they an innovative company? Are they a technology company? What is it? Why do people buy a Dell computer? They're a cost leader. When we talk about business level strategies, I mean, they're usually pretty cheap. The computer business is pretty tough, and Dell usually comes in there. I mean, you get a cheaper computer than a Dell. I mean, you look around, you can get a really no-name cheapy computer. But if you want one that people know the brand name of and so forth, it's pretty cheap. So would they want to outsource, for example, their marketing and sales? Probably, right? What about even their technological development? Probably. I don't think, Dell is not cutting edge. They've got the latest stuff, so you buy their computers, but it's not like you're not going to impress anyone with your technological prowess by breaking out your Dell notebook. On the other hand, Apple. Yeah, what type of company is Apple? What's their core competence? Is it a manufacturing company? Is it renowned for its logistics? Not really. It's not, is it? It's more of an innovator. And when we're talking about business level strategies in the next class period, we're going to say it's more of a differentiator. They're not cheap. That's for sure, right? The Apple stuff is not cheap. I recently broke down and bought an iPhone 11, and yeah, I jumped from a 6 to an 11. That's a jump of 5, by the way. Yeah, so was I happy about what I had to pay for it? No, it's pretty pricey. I mean, this seems pretty small for what you have to pay for. So, would it make sense for them to outsource their innovation, like Dell probably does? No, of course not. That's their bread and butter. That's their crown jewels. They've got to make sure that they protect that. But what about their manufacturing? Are they a manufacturing company? Heck no. It makes sense for them to outsource. And so they do. A company that you may have heard of called Foxconn. And so, all right, here's a gripe that I have. Whenever President Trump says that he wants to manufacture Apple products in the United States, I'm not convinced that's an entirely good idea, because that's kind of a low value added activity to try to say that we want to make the United States a manufacturing powerhouse. Well, that makes sense in some areas, but in others it doesn't. So anyway, back to our story here. Outsourcing. You don't want to outsource what's your core competence. So if you've got a company like Dell, they could very likely and rationally outsource their technological development, their marketing and sales. Apple, no, they wouldn't. They probably do a lot of their own marketing and sales. I'm sure they hire consultants for that, but certainly they wouldn't want to outsource their product innovation. So what's the rationale for outsourcing? Yeah, let you read that on your own. I think it's pretty straightforward at this point. Again, you want to make sure you're not outsourcing things that are part of core competencies or strategic resources. You want to protect your knowledge base. Here's an issue. Chinese firms tend to outsource much less than do firms in North America and Europe, and I've always thought that this might be a good idea for a consulting business. Yeah, I've got dreams of starting a consulting company in China after I retire from App State, and this is one of the things I thought I might get into is outsourcing issues. I'm always curious why Chinese firms, they're much better now than they were, say, 5 or 10 years ago, but they're still not outsourcing nearly as much as our American companies. So here we are, back to our golden stair step. Here. So now I hope this all makes more sense to you. We've talked about all of these, so I hope all of these components make sense to you. And I would suggest that as you study for the exam, this is a nice place to start. Go through this and make sure you understand each of these, because questions can pop up on our first exam that's going to ask you about each of these things. And so this is a nice roadmap for this chapter. Never take for granted that core competencies will continue to be a source of competitive advantage. All core competencies have the potential to become core rigidities. Core rigidity is something that a company weds itself to. It's been so successful in the past that they've convinced themselves that they can't change, and they cling to this thing even though the world may change around them, and it can be a real problem. For example, Blockbuster Video. This is one that people like to talk about now. Blockbuster Video. They had a great setup back in the 80s and the 90s. Before many of you guys were born, people would go into Blockbusters. They had these video stores on every corner. People would go in there and rent the videos. And this was a barrier. I mean, think about it. I mean, this was a great distribution network. They had name recognition. They had this whole invincible looking system in place. So whenever streaming came along, they were very reluctant to embrace it. And so there was a new company that came in and boldly grabbed and embraced the streaming technology. And it begins with an N. Yeah, Netflix. Netflix came in and boldly grabbed a hold of that new technology. Blockbuster Video thought, hey, we've got it made in the shade. Nobody's ever going to be able to touch us. We've got this here, and it's created these huge barriers. We got a great core competence. We got this cash cow that's going to live forever. And no, unfortunately, the cash cow became a core rigidity and passed away. So if I can here, talk a little bit about this. To bring this back to some earlier stuff that we talked about, the idea with a core competence and protecting your core competence is that great companies have something. We don't know what that is. It might be technology. It might be marketing. It might be culture. It might be something else. But they have something that sets them apart. Something that's valuable, rare, difficult to imitate without substitutes. And you can't be the best in the world at everything. You just can't, right? There's just too much going on. There's too much competition. Too many things are changing, so you need to identify what things that you really consider to be you're really the best in the world at, and you stick to it. And that means passing up on some things, passing up some opportunities. So the core competencies in combination with product positions are perhaps most important sources of competitive advantage. Core competencies of a firm, in addition to the analysis of its general industry and competitive environment, should drive selection of strategies. In fact, we might say that that's kind of what your strategic management course is all about. I mean, we've got these two views, and we've put both of them in place now. We've got what's the environment like out there? What opportunities and threats are out there? If we're going to be in this particular industry, what are the forces that are affecting that? And then once we know that, we start looking at our own individual self as a company. What do we have that's valuable, rare, difficult to imitate without substitutes? What can we corner and do better than anybody else and protect through good times and bad and stick to it? See, and then you fit those two pieces together. If you do a good job of that, then you're going to be, hey, all right then, so that's all we're going to do for today. In fact, this wraps up Chapter 3 and the third topic. And I just want to remind you that our first exam is coming up. It's going to be next week. It's going to be on Thursday the 10th. And it's going to cover those first 3 chapters, 1, 2, and 3. So basically, Introduction to Strategic Management, External Analysis, pay particular attention to Michael Porter's 5 forces, and then internal analysis, identifying core competencies and explaining how and why they are important. All right, so I'm going to post this up right away. This will be for our Thursday class, more or less, and then Tuesday we're going to have a review. I'm going to answer questions that you might